story of the work I've done for the last 15 years. It started from 2006 to 2010 when I was a volunteer social worker in Boston. I'd help individuals who were homeless or had disabilities find jobs, find housing, access to food banks. And during those 4 years, I learned a lot. One thing that I learned was my clients desperately wanted a job, but it was the last recession in 2008, and it was just brutal. Some people, we'd applied to over 100 jobs together, and they were, quote, lucky when they got a rejection, because at least that was a response. I'd hear repeatedly in one-on-ones, "Liz, I want an opportunity, not a handout." And after just working with people on applying to job after job after job and not having any luck, just felt like banging my head against the wall of, oh my gosh, how can I help redefine what a job is in order to include more people in the economy? That's a much easier question to ask than to answer, so I just had it floating in the back of my head for years. I transitioned careers to become a full-time art therapist in homeless shelters, and that's when everything clicked. I saw really saleable work that would literally get stuffed in the closets of the 2 shelters where I worked. And it was just because there was a lack of wall space, and also our mission was therapy. It wasn't helping individuals get money. But as I dug, I learned that there are about 1,000 existing art groups, either in shelters or disability centers in the US alone. And what an aha moment of, well, that means there's 1,000 closets that could be full of saleable art. Why don't I redefine what a job is by creating a marketplace, curating the top work from the groups, from those closets, and selling it not just as originals, but also licensing the work, renting it as prints. So it started as a very simple idea on a wandering organic path. And I'm really proud to share that after starting with 4,000 of savings 10 years ago, Art Lifting has now sold tens of millions worth of artwork, with the majority of the profit going straight back to our artists. So many of our supporters are in the room. Do you mind raising your hand if you're an Art Lifting client? Thank you for making that difference on our artists. Just to start with some framing of what is the scope of this. 1 in 4 individuals in the US have a disability, and 77% of them are unemployed. These statistics might seem impossible of how can we help individuals get that number closer to 0. But I think about, well, every one individual like Charlie French that we help create a job for is making a difference. And maybe we'll get that number to 76%, not 0%. But still, we'd be working to change people's lives. I'm going to start with stories of 3 artists and then transition to examples of how Art Lifting has partnered with different corporations. The artist behind this work is named Scott Benner. We started working together a decade ago. At the time, he was homeless, and he had seen Art Lifting in the news. We had just launched, and he was living in a shelter, and his caseworker said, "Reach out to this art group." And I was, as you can imagine, I wasn't earning a salary from Art Lifting in the beginning. So I was working in a dorm at Harvard, basically as a dorm mom, and didn't have an office. So he came to meet me in the cafeteria of the Harvard dorm and brought this artwork and 40 years worth of beautiful artwork that was literally on a table with chicken fingers on the other end of it. But Scott became homeless after what he calls the perfect storm. He had been a steel worker his whole life and done everything right. He saved 6 figures in his 401k, but 3 unexpected things happened all within a year. First, he got Horner syndrome, which is a really rare disease that makes you unexpectedly tired and confused. So he couldn't even operate heavy equipment anymore. Oh, sorry, I meant to say, first he lost his job during the recession, and then within a year, he got Horner syndrome. So he couldn't even apply to jobs to operate heavy equipment anymore. And it was just a tough time. He couldn't switch to being a knowledge worker as a 50-year-old. Then the perfect storm continued, and Scott's wife was diagnosed with cancer. All of a sudden, they were both unemployed, had really extreme medical expenses, and that 6 figures in savings went really quickly. He ended up homeless, sleeping under the bushes by a tea stop in Boston. And then when the weather got cold in November, he transitioned to Father Bill's shelter. What Scott would do during the day, as you might know, most homeless shelters are what's called night shelters. You typically are only allowed to be there from 4 p.m. till 7 a.m. or so. So in Boston winters, Scott had to figure out a warm place to go during the day. And Scott would go to the library, and he would draw. He had drawn his whole life as a stress reliever from the pressures of being a steel worker. And this is his masterpiece. He created it over 6 years. And it took 1,300 hours to create. So this was on the table with the chicken fingers on the other end. I'm freaking out about getting grease stains on it. And he's casually saying, yeah, it was simple. I just started with a dot in the middle and went out from there. It's been amazing to see Scott climb in his career over the last decade. This is him speaking at a Google employee engagement event. This is Deval Patrick, the former governor of Massachusetts, looking at Scott's work hanging above his desk in Bain Capital. This is Scott on the Today Show and the cover of the New York Times business section. His work was even licensed for Starbucks gift cards. And I know Mohawk's in the room, partnered with Mohawk on carpets. You can buy his work through West Elm. And this is my favorite partnership. We were approached by Lisa Mattresses to embroider his work into their mattresses. Scott and I laughed when we were approached with this idea because we were both like, don't you put sheets on mattresses? But it was an unbelievably successful partnership and even came with a gallery called the Dream Gallery in Soho that was trying to reimagine stale mattress stores and make it into this fun experience. Next, I want to transition to artist Mia Brown. Mia is an incredible entrepreneur. She happens to have cerebral palsy and isn't able to paint with her hands. So the way that she creates her work is using what she calls her magic wand. I love Mia's quote saying, "I'm an artist who happens to have a disability." She sold worldwide. This is her work in Amazon's HQ2, in a tech company. And even probably a lot of you have seen the girl wearing a backpack around at this conference. I'm wearing Mia's work. We launched a partnership with JanSport about 6 months ago, and it was so exciting to see Mia's portrait and story inside the bags. I'm really proud to think about all the kids who now wear her work and other Art Lifting's work, and how that story impacts them and their perspective. I want to now transition to artist Eric Santamaria. At first, when you look at this, it probably just looks like a beautiful room with a beautiful artwork in it. But then when you look a little closer, do you notice anything different about this artwork? Feel free to call out. Yeah, exactly. Tire marks. When you zoom in, you can see it a bit more closely. Tire marks on the bottom of the piece. I was blown away when I first met Eric in LA. The way that he creates his work is using the canvas on the ground, and depending on the day, has either markers or paintbrushes on his wheelchair. He really defines what resilience is to me. If plan A didn't work, of painting with his hand. Plan B didn't work, of using a magic wand. But he still figured out a way to create. When we partner with companies of sharing stories like Eric's, we've heard that it makes a huge impact on employees, of reading Eric's story, and when an employee is having a bad day, saying, well, plan A is not working for me, but look at Eric. He was innovative and he was resilient. He also has soared in his career. We've worked together for about 8 or 9 years so far, and I did not mean that sword pun, but his work is in Delta's LAX lounge. If any of you get the Pottery Barn catalog, last year they had a multi-page spread featuring Eric, and you can also buy his work through them. I'm so proud of the impact that partnerships with you all has made on artists like Scott and Mia and Eric. And I'm also proud of how our impact has expanded over the years. After starting with just 4 artists in Boston, we now work with 200 artists in 35 states. We're so proud that our artists have cumulatively earned millions. And my long-term vision is for all of our artists to earn a living wage. We've got a lot of work to go. Last year, 7 of our 200 artists earned $50,000 or more. But I'm confident that if we stay focused on our goals, that we can continue to expand that impact. As I was mentioning earlier about the partners in the room, we work with 500 corporations now at all different scales. And I'll share a few specific examples of work we've done. But before that, I wanted to connect to a theme that I've heard throughout this conference of needing to make a business case to whoever you report to on, well, is this expense worth it? And we all know that art is good for business, but we also know people need statistics. So this is an independent national survey about with employees saying that 94% of them say that art enhances the workplace. And the majority of them say it reduces their stress and increases their productivity. Obviously, with the earn the commute dialogue, everyone's thinking about, okay, we have these mandates for people to come in, but they're just not listening to them. Or they're just badging in to get their coffee and sneaking out afterwards. Creating a warm environment there isn't one solution to it, but using artwork with stories like the ones I've shared helps contribute to it. We're also a certified women-owned business, so we can help contribute to your existing goals of diverse supplier spend, for example. Now to the great stuff of seeing how the work can be applied to your spaces. I want to give a big shout out to Brian from PwC, who's been a huge supporter of ArtLifting's mission for 8 years or so. This is artist Kiana Madison's work in PwC in Florida. Since our artists have disabilities, they typically can't physically create a mural, but murals are a huge need of our clients. So we either have the smaller artwork translated into wall coverings, or in this case, we hired a mural vendor to blow up Kiana's work. But Kiana got to come in person to Florida for an employee engagement event and sign her work and inspire employees there. Brian shared, "I've been in workplace services for decades. Art has often been something that felt intimidating to many people. Once we started using ArtLifting art, art became accessible to everyone in the office. I wish you could see the reactions of people when they see the art in our offices, especially when they read the artist's bios. It opens up that possibility to talk about differences, talk about mental health, to talk about disabilities in a whole new way that is unbelievable." Well said, Brian. As you can imagine, all of the artwork comes with a story. If the artist is verbal, it also comes with a quote by them, and also includes the overall impact. An example of how the labels have had an impact is a biotech reporter for the Boston Globe saw the labels recently under this 20 by 20 foot ArtLifting piece in Foundation Medicine's headquarters. And he also saw the labels in Eli Lilly's headquarters. And in a surreal moment a month ago, he reached out to us and ended up, within a week, putting us on the cover of the Boston Globe business section. So another example of how it could be good for business is positive PR for your company. And run through some really quick examples. Our artwork is in 20 Google offices so far. One thing that Google does is they will have art rotate every quarter to represent all different employee resource groups. I'm running a little late, so I won't have time to read all these quotes, but I'll share the deck with you all. Our artwork's in Amazon. This is artist Yvette with her work. And John Schultler from Amazon's in charge of 65 million square feet. So it was really exciting 8 years ago when we launched a first pilot with him and his team in Seattle and have since expanded. Artist Eric Jensen takes old keyboards and makes incredible, innovative work out of it. He hides inspirational messages within these gorgeous pieces. This is one of the partnerships we have with Delta and Shell and Wells Fargo, CVS, CBRE. I want to give Peter a shout out. He's been also a supporter of ArtLifting's mission for 8 years and said, "Everyone talks about building more inclusive and people-centric spaces. What's more inclusive than the mission of ArtLifting? ArtLifting's enabled CBRE to create elevated, approachable offices. Thanks to ArtLifting art, anyone who walks in our offices can see our core values in an authentic way." Thanks to these partnerships, artists' lives have been changed. Artist Nick Morse and I have worked together for a decade. Nick's nonverbal, but his dad shares that it's so clear that Nick feels the impact of the work. Every month, we give our artists a check on the 15th, and Steve talks about how Nick is smiling and pacing every time he gets the check. Thinking about how we could partner together, of course, art inside your spaces, but also outside is a possibility. This 100-foot mural just launched a couple weeks ago in Boston. We could also partner on acoustic felts or glass film, or on your annual CSR reports. It was quite surreal when Art Lifting had 8 employees in 2017 to have Fred Smith with 400,000 employees talk about how we had a brilliant business model. We're proud to have grown the team over the years and now have 26 full-time employees. I want to finish with one partnership that has made an enormous impact on our artists. It's helped some artists earn 6 figures in a given year. Bank of America has shared publicly that they've spent millions on Art Lifting art. They've gotten press about the work, and Rebecca Siegfrieds has shared, at Bank of America, it's important that we take a human-centric design approach. Art Lifting's been an invaluable partner in supporting this strategy at scale. We are creating engaging and memorable spaces that resonate with the communities we serve.